Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. So happy World Food Safety Day. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. It's June 7th. It's the third edition of the World Food Safety Day. That World Food Safety Day was settled actually 3 years ago, with estimated 60 million people falling ill after eating contaminated food each year, and the global burden of foodborne diseases affecting especially individuals of all ages, but especially children under 5 and persons living in low-income countries. Food safety is high on the agenda, and thanks to the World Food Safety Day and to the UN General Assembly, there is a World Food Safety Day to make sure that we all make sure that food safety is prior and paramount on our agenda in all our organizations. I'm very happy to welcome all of you and to welcome some panelists today. It's a special World Food Safety Day. We know that food safety is a shared value for everyone, and it's everyone's business. And how do we work with everyone to make sure it's everyone's business is key. And this year edition, Safe Food Now for Healthy Tomorrow, we wanted to focus on what does it mean on the longer term, on the longer benefits of food safety in terms of social, environmental, economic, health benefits. And we felt that was actually essential to discuss with the finance community about that, because no better than the financial community and the ESG community has invested into the longer terms benefits of companies who are actually having a responsible role for environmental, social, and food safety issues. That's why we are actually organizing today this webinar with FAIRR Initiative and Equity. And I want to welcome Maria Montosa from the FAIRR Initiative, who is an ESG analyst over there. Suresh Mistry, you are one of the co-founder of Equity, and I will let you introduce you in a minute. Before we start, I want to welcome Wai-Chan, the managing director of the CGF. I'm super happy you were able to join us today in the middle of your very busy agenda. And I want to ask you why this is critical for the CGF agenda to make sure that the non-financial performance is linked to the financial performance, and how the CGF is playing a key role in that framework and that link between finance and non-financial world. Wai-Chan, over to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and hi everyone. Nice to see you all virtually. It's actually it's an interesting question, because obviously in the real world you have the financial side and the non-financial side, and obviously given the way the corporates work, the two have to be linked together, and so it's always important to link the two together. And on the financial side, of course, you need to have shareholder returns, and I think that's obviously the very important piece which all the shareholders are looking at. But as you know, more increasingly now, there are many more types of investors that are looking at ESG aspects to companies as well. And so you actually have normal funds that look at ESG components, environmental, social, and governance components. But you also have the kind of well, you have two pieces, right? You have the big companies who are looking at it as a component, and you also have ESG investors. So you actually have two types of investors now, both looking at the ESG components. So what do they look for? They look for financial returns, obviously, but they also look for making sure that you have an ESG angle to what you do, and it's there for some purpose to what you do, and trying to link the two together. So from an investor point of view, the two are already linking together. And from a real life point of view, as a company, you've got to make money to your shareholders, but also you need to ensure that you look after the planet in which we live in. And I guess in the food safety realm, it's also just as important, because the food safety side is also something that's incredibly important. As you described, so many people get sick, right? So therefore, linking the two together is absolutely critical. And I don't know how much you want me to explain about what CGF is doing, but what CGF is doing is we actually have coalitions to help us achieve some of these tasks. So we have a coalition related to food safety called GFSI, which I'm sure many people know about. But we also have seven other coalitions that are related to other sustainability elements and also some business elements. And that's the way that we try to tackle the financial and non-financial sides, because the companies obviously understand the need for financial, and they also understand the need for ESG, so they combine the two together. But I think what's unique about what we do is that we combine the manufacturers, i.e. the brands, people like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Nestle. We combine the brands together with the retailers of Walmart, Alibaba. We combine them together on a global basis, using CEOs to drive the agenda, and using CEOs to drive the action, because then things happen. And as you know, if the CEO drives the action, things happen within the company. So we play, I think, quite a unique role in the intersection between the global aspects, the manufacturer and the retailer aspects, the shareholders from a financial point of view, and also from an ESG point of view. So we actually play quite a central role. So we try to juggle all these things together, and that's how we make things move forward. And just to be maybe a bit clearer on the coalitions that we have, the sustainability related coalition. Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, so
yeah, I was going to ask you to tell us the coalitions. Go ahead.
Well, we have 8, and I'm Chinese, and 8 is a lucky number, as you know, right? So we have 8. Food safety is 1. Product data, which is essentially how to transfer data between the manufacturer and the retailer to make it more efficient, is another one. And then we have more sustainability ones, so collaboration for healthy lives, which is essentially how do you get people to take a healthier choice when they actually buy something, but also a healthy and sustainable choice, because now sustainability becomes an increasingly important component. We have forest positive, which is essentially looking at 4 commodities and finding ways to reduce the deforestation footprint of those commodities. We have sustainable supply chain. We have, I'm going to forget one, plastic waste, so elimination of plastic waste. We have food waste, elimination of food waste, and I've probably forgotten some. So those I hope I've counted 8. If there's not 8, it should be 8, and so I apologize for missing one out. Human Rights Coalition, that's the final one. So we have one for human rights. It's not human rights in its entirety, but we're looking at human rights as it relates to forced labor, and how can you remove that from your supply chains. So those are the topics that we've chosen, and at the end of the day, you know, we are a relatively CEO-led organization. Those are the ones that they've considered to be important, and I'm sure we can add more. It's just a question of time that we may be adding some more, but I think the important thing is to create some outcomes and impact now. And so and food safety is obviously a very important one too. And as you mentioned, the Food Systems Summit, which is taking place later on this year, also plays a unique role, in the sense that food safety is going to be a massively important component to it, and therefore hopefully we can articulate some of our ideas within the Food Safety Summit to ensure that what we do on food safety actually can be implemented and amplified throughout the world. I've probably spoken too much. I'll just be quiet.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Wai-Chan. Well, I think all of the coalitions the CGF is working on, our members are being actually measured and screened by our panelists today. So and those are the topics that are key that you consider in your day-to-day activities. So Maria first, woman first, Suresh, for that one, sorry. Maria, can you tell us what is the FAIRR Initiative to start with, and who are you in the FAIRR Initiative, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Montosa, and I am an ESG analyst at the FAIRR Initiative. I joined FAIRR 2 years ago, and I work primarily on the FAIRR Protein Producer Index. FAIRR was launched in 2015, and we are an institutional investor network with current 38 trillion of investor support. We focus on raising awareness of the environmental, social, and governance risks and opportunities brought about by intensive livestock production. The FAIRR Protein Producer Index is an ESG benchmark assessment of the 60 largest animal protein companies in the world. And we assess these companies across 10 risk and opportunity factors that we have identified as being most material to this sector, among which food safety is included. Investors then use our detailed analysis across every step of their selection process, such as, for example, portfolio construction, due diligence, corporate engagement, and stewardship. On the company side, we also engage with the index companies, which use our methodology and recommendations to improve their sustainability performance. Some examples of companies using our recommendations include China Menu Dairy, which is one of the largest Chinese dairy producers, and it is currently reviewing its antibiotics policy and public disclosure.
You're muted, Dan. And you're on mute, I'm afraid.
Sorry about that, Suresh. Now, sorry. Can I let you introduce yourself and what is Equity actually, and tell us.
Thank you for inviting me today to join you for this webinar. So yes, my name is Suresh Mistry. I'm a co-founder and also head of ESG and impact reporting at Equity. Equity is a business we formed about 10 years ago now, 2010, and we're an emerging markets equities investment house. So that's where we specialize, and we focus on using ESG within our investment process. But I think before I explain the ESG aspect, I'll just explain the business model that we established with the firm. Essentially, it consists of three connected parts, but that form what we would call our Equity virtuous circle. The first aspect is attractive returns. As a fund house, our goal is to deliver returns for our clients. That's our focus. And ever since we founded the firm, and back in 2010, nobody had even heard of ESG, we were talking about ESG because we knew that had a critical impact on the long-term returns for our investors. So ESG is incorporated in all our funds across our investment products and is actually implemented by our investment team who I work alongside. As a consequence, our portfolios are what we would call responsible investments. And by that, I mean not just companies such as renewables companies or companies focused in the impact space, but traditional companies, food manufacturers, cement companies, perhaps, retailers, all sorts of companies, but companies who consider long-term inclusive growth. The companies you'd be proud to have in your portfolio, not just for our investors, but the employees are proud to work for those companies. So our portfolios are responsible investments. Now, the issue with ESG and the firm belief at Equity is the way you allocate capital shapes society. And for us, we don't only think about our investors' capital, but our own personal capital as well. So we take 10% of the revenues our company makes, not profits, it's revenue from the top line, and we donate that to the Equity Transforming Lives Foundation, where we develop projects on the ground in the countries where we invest to help some of the poorest people on the planet join the economic ladder. So we're investing in places like India, Africa, etc. And so we want economic growth to be equal and fair in the economy. We want to build sustainable economies. So we help those people who are often excluded from the formal economy to get onto training, education, or microfinance to help them build themselves and become entrepreneurs or active participants. Now, what that does is it helps build a sustainable economy, and that long-term helps our investments because the companies we're investing in are working in more stable environments. And finally, actually, some of that work on the ground helps us with insights into potential new companies. So some of the beneficiaries talk to us about their experience of the food they eat or the mobile phone they use or their aspirations, and that often helps inform our research agenda. So essentially, that is the Equity business. We've probably donated over $2.5 million or so to projects on the ground where we invest, transforming around 60,000 lives.
Thank you very much, Suresh. That's great. We might want to hear from you and your projects actually during that webinar. That sounds very, very exciting. Maria, should we start with you to know when actually and why the FAIRR initiative started to engage on food safety? Can you tell us about this journey?
Yeah, sure. So in the index, we assess companies against the risk factors that are considered as most material to animal protein producers. And statistics demonstrate that food contamination and food recalls are frequent in the meat industry. For example, in the US, from 2013 to 2019, the recalls for meat increased by 65%, while the recalls for other produced and processed foods decreased by 34%. Food safety is a key risk for investors because of the company's product recall cost and negative stock price events. It is estimated that a product recall can cost the company around $10 million, which can have a severe impact on a company's returns. Research also shows that for the most serious recall events, companies' stock returns decreased by an average of 1.15%, which resulted in a decrease of 109 million in market equity decrease. And in addition to food contamination, the meat industry is vulnerable to other emerging issues, such as, for example, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which are particularly dangerous to treat because they cannot be easily treated with existing antibiotics. Animal protein producers consume around 80% of all antibiotics used in the world, including those that are critically important to human health. And the massive use of antibiotics to help animals achieve a slaughter weight while preventing them from having infections due to their crowded living conditions is leading to growing concerns for antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but also for zoonotic diseases and new pandemics. And some companies have had already some recalls due to antibiotic-resistant bacteria. For example, in 2018, JBS had to recall about 12 million pounds of raw beef due to risk of antibiotic-resistant salmonella contamination, which made the company's share price fell by 5%.
All right, thank you. So you have, how many risk factors do you have, and why is this risk factor is very important for you, Martha? This food safety risk factor is really important. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so we have 9 risk factors on which food safety is included, and 1 opportunity factor, which is sustainable proteins. Yeah, so basically it is important for us because there is a materiality linked to food safety. So companies that have a poor food safety management program, they risk their license to operate. And because we only look at risk factors that are financially material, then food safety is just a basic one to have in our methodology.
Okay, thank you. So we'll come back to the methodology maybe and to some key figures afterwards. Suresh, can I ask you the same question? Why food safety is important in your in your software, and why do you think this is critical between financial and extra financial performance?
Absolutely. Firstly, we're not experts in food safety. That's why we work with FAIRR, because they're the experts in this area. We are broad investors, we are ESG investors, and we understand whether it's food safety, product safety is generally under S of ESG. Product integrity is critical. And so food safety for the food and beverage sector is clearly the critical aspect. So we look for expertise, and that's why Maria and their team bring us that. But essentially, food safety, as investors, is the impact on returns, both positive and negative. It's critical for us because we're judging, we're putting our investors' money in stocks that we in the future of, and food safety scandals, as Maria's mentioned, can cause huge impacts on financial returns. But there's a couple of other areas as well why food safety is important for us. If we look forward, particularly in emerging markets where we invest, we are seeing rapid growth. We're seeing rapid urbanization, rapid growth of consumption, and a lot of moves, particularly from the rural to urban environments, where food safety becomes a bigger issue because the time length between a food being actually sourced or produced increases as people gather together into urban clusters rather than being in rural areas. So the need for those hygiene standards or protecting food or managing that whole supply chain is much more critical in an urbanized environment than necessarily in a rural one, where the kind of distance between the farm and the fork is actually very short. And secondly, and also importantly, as I said earlier, for us, we're trying to build society that we want for the future. So we want to build sustainable, equitable societies. And so if food safety is causing issues, and it tends to be in the poorer starters of the economy, particularly as you mentioned earlier, children, often the poor children, by getting food from the informal economy, they're most at risk of missing schooling or missing education or opportunity because of issues related to food safety. So for us, food safety is critical for all those reasons. And it's a broad issue, food safety. It's not just about the quality of the food itself, but it's also the whole system and the process the company organizes around its production that is critical to us as investors.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that's really great. So I think we understand you see the food industry as having a key role in those food system, actually, in this food system, and as a crossroad of many challenges, actually, that the world is going to have to face and is already starting to face in terms of sustainable development goals. Actually, this year, there is the UN Food System Summit, which is actually here to try to convene everyone to address through various action tracks all those challenges that are on food system today, and to make sure that we accelerate addressing the SDGs linked to food systems. Wai-Chan, maybe I'm going to ask you first a question, and then maybe Suresh and Maria, you can talk about the UN Food System Summit if you have something to say about that. But how do you see this? This is the first exercise for the CGF to work and to participate in such a big machine. It's so much at the crossroad of a lot of things. How do you see that summit, and how the CGF is working on that, and what is your role on that?
I think for those who don't know, I mean, there is a UN Food System Summit that's taking place towards the end of the year. I think it's meant to be September, October. That's one of the main summits taking place. And they keep on saying New York, but I don't know if it's going to be New York, but they keep on saying it's New York. Maybe it's New York plus hybrid or something. And then there's a pre-summit, I think sometime in July, August. And that one is, again, they keep on saying Rome, I think it's probably going to be a hybrid event with limited participation in Rome and some participation, a lot more participation virtually. I think the important thing is that they're trying to promote an idea, which is the fact that we need to transform our food systems for the world to be a sustainable place. And so it's a very, very noble purpose. And I guess it's just the same as the COP26 or COP, I think 21, when the French had the Paris Climate Accord signed up by everybody. And I think it's essentially, they don't like me saying this, but it's kind of the parallel to COP26, but it's for food systems. And so essentially it's about getting all different types of actors together in the food system and identifying ways of transforming the food system so that the food system becomes much more sustainable and therefore in line with all of the sustainable development goals. So essentially that's the concept behind it. And they've got 5 action tracks, which are essentially, think of it as work modules. And 2 of those work modules are, in fact, all of them overlap with what CGF does, but 2 of them in particular are of great interest to CGF. First one being access to safe food, safe and nutritious food. I think that's the first action track, which is obviously clearly something that's why we're here today having this conversation. Second one is sustainable, nutritious and sustainable consumption behavior, which is I've got the wording all wrong, but it's essentially is that kind of idea. And then it goes on through the value chain into the back parts of the value chain for the other 3 remaining action tracks. But the 2 that we're focused on are safe food and nutritious and nutritious sustainable consumption patterns. So we're looking at those 2. And the way that we think about it is, you know, at CGF, we have got together our members together and come up with 8 coalitions, and those 8 coalitions we think can make a difference to the world. And so therefore, how do we make a difference even more? It's to get our ideas amplified elsewhere. So we are pushing one of the food safety ideas, which obviously you're leading at the moment, Anne. We're also pushing our food loss and waste idea, which we're actually working together with WR World Resources Institute on. And we're also advocating some ideas around collaboration for healthy lives, which is our sustainable and nutritious consumption ideas. So those are the 3 ideas that we're advocating. We're trying to ensure that those ideas get amplified or get screened into the UN Food System Summit process. So essentially, think of the world being asked for ideas, and at the moment, the world is being asked for. I think they call them game-changing ideas. So obviously, by definition, a game-changing idea is a big idea. And so they're looking for ideas. I think they've identified several hundred ideas, and we're in the process of screening them down to a few, because obviously, you know, you can't make 100 ideas work around the world. You have to pick a few, and that's what they're doing right now. And once that process is done, then it's going to be creating coalitions around those ideas. So, and those coalitions will be government, will be business, will be NGO, will probably be the ESG investor community as well. And in fact, there are some ideas that are related to setting up ESG funds focused around food waste, for example. That's one of the game-changing ideas that they're investigating. So it is a very, very large and ambitious project. It's my first involvement with the UN, and I can say that they have the greatest and noblest of purposes to try and do things. And so it's very, very all-encompassing. I think the challenge is prioritizing, getting people to sign up, and then coming up with an actual deliverable in time for the September-October summit, where people then sign up to make a difference to the world, and basically say, we're going to do this and that. We're going to push ahead with this coalition to change the way that food is produced. Alternative proteins, I noticed that you mentioned that as an opportunity, Maria, so to link it to you. That's one of the ideas that was thrown back in there, because, you know, at the end of the day, one of the ideas always is, let's eat less meat, because less meat equals better for the environment, right? If you just look at the simple maths. However, the pushback from the alternative protein people is, it's something, it's steeped in our cultures, at least some of our cultures, not all of them, for the last 3,000, whatever, who's the oldest culture? Maybe China's the oldest culture, so 5,000 years old, right? It's a 5,000-year-old culture of eating meat. How can we change it overnight like this? We're not going to change it overnight like this. So therefore, you have to deal with eating meat. So it's a question of eating less meat, or eating meat that's grown in a more sustainable way. And so that's why, you know, one of the ideas, Maria, that you identified is exactly one of the things that is coming out of the Food System Summit. Well, it's been thrown in there. Whether it gets screened out or screened in, I don't know, but I hope it gets screened in. Yeah, and so and that will be another. So that's what we're doing. So it comes up with opportunities and things, and it's probably spoken too much, but hopefully you get a sense as to what this Food System Summit is trying to achieve. But it's very ambitious, and I think they're not going to get it fully right, but at least they're going to get pointed in the right direction, and then it's going to be doing it again and again and again and getting it better and better and better. So that's my that's what's happening.
Thank you, Wai-Chan. So I think I will ask, it's an option question for Suresh and Maria, if we have time, is what would be your dream expectation from this summit, actually, and what we can get right all together. But maybe before, I want to come back to you, Suresh, and ask you, what are you looking at? What kind of things are you looking on food safety as an investor? In a bit more detail, actually, that might be linked what Wai-Chan was saying a little bit. But you say there were some positive and negative risks, and what is considered as a risk and an opportunity as well in food safety, if you can tell us a bit more about that. Thank you.
No problem at all. And I'll just build on what Wai-Chan was saying. A couple of those things from the UNFSS I think are really important to think about in terms of emerging markets, particularly when you think about that context.
Yeah.
Safe and nutritious food that's affordable, because we're talking about a huge difference between developed and emerging and frontier markets. So that's really important. And also, I can be devil's advocate here a little and just say, sometimes sustainable consumption is and a lot of promotion of food in the emerging markets is based around a Western diet, which is not necessarily a good thing in many ways. So we have to just think about some of those kind of cultural issues and real economic issues that different parts of the world face, and also issues such as water scarcity is a massive issue in terms of food resilience.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, food safety, as I said earlier, food safety is not one thing, it's a combination of things for us as an investor. It sits within the ESG framework, and we have to look at a business from a holistic perspective. And so when we're looking at food safety, one of the areas that gives us an indication as to the quality of the business and the quality of the process is food traceability. How well does that company understand the provenance of its food? We invest in a company, it's actually a Westlife in India, which is actually does McDonald's. In fact, it's a McDonald's franchise across India, relating to that first point I made earlier. And they've got farm to fork. They can do the whole traceability of every product that is in their supply chain from farm to fork. Now, I think many companies are doing that today, and 98% of their sourcing is local. So there's that resilience, that ability to know that it's locally sourced and it's understood. We also look at the policies that these companies implement to support suppliers. Maria mentioned antibiotics. What is their policy towards antibiotics use within their supply chain? Having a clear policy is important for us. Use of sustainable palm oil. What standards do they follow? Do they follow internationally recognized standards, or do they follow locally developed standards which may be of a different quality or different standard? How do they engage and train suppliers? Many companies, their suppliers can be actually smallholder farmers, can be relatively small organizations. So their relationship with those companies and how they work with them in terms of training, development, providing them expertise. We work with a company, we have invested in the past in a company called Nutresa in Colombia, and they work very closely with their farmers. I think they actually work with USAID in terms of training and funding, providing the farmers with not just a fair income, but actually the ability to increase yield or other things to actually improve their supply and the quality of their supply. Clearly, when you're moving into other sectors, restaurants, talking about staff training in terms of the policy that the companies implement in terms of that. Health and safety. I mean, let's face it, if you don't have a health and safety policy and you're a food company, we will not be investing in you. It's a red flag. You can just tell us straight away that that's not a company we're investing in. Something connected to GFSI is the standards, certifications, regulatory standards that people achieve. One of our companies, we've got a Chinese noodle manufacturer called Unipresident, and they have the FSSC 22000. I think that's one of the standards. And we look and we assess them on their, not their just diet, but actually their achievement certification and the consistency with which they achieve that certification. And ultimately, a lot of food safety is drawn out by corporate governance, the quality of the corporate governance in the organization. Does the company have a whistleblowing policy? It might not be directly connected to food safety, but if they don't have a whistleblowing policy, then if there is an issue in food safety, there's no protection for anybody to actually come back to the company and inform them of any issues in that respect. And also having independent board directors. So food safety can be part of a holistic analysis of a company. Ultimately, what we care about is, are the management aligned to us as small shareholders, minority shareholders? Are they quality? Do they think long term for their business? And clearly, by thinking long term, you must be thinking about the environment, how your employees are being treated, and how well you are governed as an organization. So hopefully that gives you a sense of our investment process and how we incorporate it. In terms of risks, clearly, the biggest risk of food safety, really, you know, I don't want to teach people to suck eggs because you guys are in the industry. It's the reputational risk that we face for the organisation. But even as ESG investors, we get hurt. You know, we were investors 5 years ago in Brazil Foods, which is a meat producer. I mean, Maria will know them well, and you know, track record, everything kind of ticked. You know, just from our perspective, was a company that there was fraud within the organisation and connected with the government as well. I think there was the wheat flesh, our Operation Wheat Flesh, with the scandal. The share price hasn't recovered, and that was 2017. It's still 40 or 50 odd % below the share price. The reputational risk combined with financial risk that creates. The loss of license to operate is a massive risk for companies. You know, how the loss of market access. You know, if you're exporting to other countries, then how can you export? You can't have the market access. And ultimately, the biggest risk is, as a more socially driven investor who care about society as a whole, if the food safety is risking wider epidemics or wider pandemics, you take, you know, the COVID as an example, potentially of that in the future. We've got things like, I remember in the past being in the UK in the 80s, and with the BSE scandal, the mad cow disease, as they called it at the time. So these kinds of issues have wider economic impact, not just on the food industry. On the flip side, wow, opportunity is great from doing this well. Margin growth, you know, customers are going to trust you more. They're going to be more satisfied. They're going to be prepared to pay, you know, a higher margin. And for us as investors, margin translates into valuation ultimately for a firm. You know, the wider market access that provides, and also I think one area particularly is about alternative protein and new products and achieving kind of the UN SDGs. First mover advantage in new products. Are these companies leading the development of the markets? You know, if there are, you know, we have some confection manufacturers, we have people producing bakery goods. They're already thinking in emerging markets, thinking about reducing salt. Maybe not just considering today's you know, opportunity. Hopefully a long answer, but hopefully the aspect.
No, thank you. That was actually a perfect answer. And actually, before we come back to Maria, so that she can tell us more about the methodology and the key figures of the FAIRR initiative, I think, yeah, we are in the middle of GFSI of finalizing a new strategy for a capacity building program. We have been using the global markets program for the past 10 years to help less sophisticated food business operators to get to the certification level with our recognized certification program owners. And one of the conclusion of this strategic review we have been doing with our stakeholders is, well, you need to make sure there are more proteins that are included into your toolkits, into your new program. And indeed, this new capacity building program needs to be at the crossroad of those structural shifts and challenges that the food system are having. So we want to make sure with this new program, we'll be addressing more SDGs directly linked to water management, for example, to climate action, to better education and quality of training of all the supply chain, to gender equality, because we don't consider enough the role of women in this food industry, to make sure that it's easier for anyone to partner with us, even if with regulators also, for example. So I'm glad to hear you saying that actually maybe we are on the right track, and I think stay tuned everyone, because in the next weeks and months we'll be announcing some key changes for our capacity building program. So thank you very much for this big answer. Before I ask some questions to Maria, I want to make sure you can all ask us questions, because we are here for you. So please ask questions in the chat box. I will be reading them and asking them to our speakers. So if you have questions for any of us, please feel free to ask questions. We are here for you. I'm sure you will have lots of questions after Maya is answering. So, Maya, can I ask you, why are you integrating GFSI in the food safety risk factor? Please tell us everything about it.
Yes, so in the index methodology, we try to align as much as possible with existing standards so we can avoid increasing reporting burden on companies. And we recognize GFSI as one of the most important certification programs to be aligned with in our food safety risk factor, because GFSI brings an advanced industry-driven approach which covers all geographies, including emerging markets, where the discussion around food safety was very basic until recently.
All right. And so can you tell us, how do you build that index, and how do you concretely include GFSI? I don't want to go into your kitchen now, because it's very complex, but how do you make it, and how do your what is your job, so that then, I guess, from what I understood, Suresh can use all your knowledge and your data to invest properly linked to his objectives. So tell us, Maria.
Yes, so in the index, the food safety risk factor comprises two KPIs, food safety system and product recalls and market bans. And we integrate GFSI in the food safety system KPI, where we look at the company's direct operations and suppliers. So for best practice, a company should have 100% of its own facilities and suppliers GFSI certified. The company should also disclose the frequency of audits and corrective action rates due to non-conformance. Finally, we also look at food safety innovation, which I will talk a little bit more later on. But so far, based on the findings from the Index 2020, on average, GFSI certification is common across geographies, with 75% of the index companies disclosing that their facilities have achieved a certification recognized by GFSI. However, this is not universal. Of the 60 companies, only 8 disclose that 100% of their facilities are GFSI certified, of which most of them are in Europe. Then, concerning requirements to suppliers, 15 companies disclose that the suppliers are expected to have GFSI certification. However, only 4 companies disclose 100% of suppliers have GFSI certification.
All right, thank you. Would you expect or want to have more company giving you that data and disclosing that kind of information, Maria?
Sorry, could you repeat, Anne?
Would you want to have more companies to disclose those kind of information to you? And what would be the benefits for them to do that?
Yes, of course. So what we found with companies' disclosure is that sometimes they are actually doing things regarding food safety, but the problem is that they don't disclose this information publicly. So when we engage with the companies in our talks and recommendations, we put an emphasis of the importance to disclose this kind of things publicly, so investors, stakeholders, and the wider community can know what they are actually doing.
All right, thank you. Suresh, I see you nodding as well. Is it, do you have something to add to what Maria was saying? Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the work that FAIRR do is critical for investors such as ourselves, because we look for that expertise and that independence to give us something to engage with companies on. And part of our role as investors is not just to buy the stock, but also engage with that company over time. And often, many companies are on a journey, particularly in emerging markets. They may be doing some of those things in the food safety, but just don't realize they actually have to disclose it to investors, because for years, investors have never asked about it. And since ESG has become a little bit of a relatively popular or fashionable topic, they're now being asked about it. So What we do is spend a lot of our time engaging with companies to incorporate this information into their, whatever they want to call them, their ESG disclosures or their CSR reports, etc., because increasingly investors are looking for it. I think the important thing, though, there is to differentiate between the kind of tick box investors versus the kind of real expert investors. And I think, you know, you can put food safety into a box, a series of tick boxes, but that's not really going to help you as an investor. You need to be able to understand the values and the importance that management place on food safety. And you know, mistakes and errors happen in all sorts of, accidents happen in all sorts of organizations. You know, when we're dealing with high risk companies in mining or extractives, there are accidents. These are dangerous environments they operate. But you're not looking at, you're looking at the risk of that accident. Clearly, processes and policies lead to that, similar to food safety. But also you're looking at the reaction, the response when those issues happen. Because if those responses don't marry up, then that's clearly an issue. And those scandals can be ongoing. And when you're looking at the history of companies, you often find companies with ongoing scandals. You tend to not find, some companies don't have those scandals because they've got great processes. But those that do deal with them, I think customers can be quite forgiving. I mean, it takes a bit of time, but they can be forgiving. And investors like ourselves need to be forward-looking. And if we can see changes being implemented by the management or a response, then, you know, for us, that's actually an accident can actually lead to a more positive outcome.
All right, thank you. Well, I think that's linked to one question we have actually from Alec Kyriakides that we know well at GFSI. Alec was working for Sainsbury before, and he was one of the GFSI board member when there was a board. Now we call them a steering committee. And he's now a food safety consultant. He's asking, do you think recall is a good measure of food safety culture in a company? And why did you choose this KPI? So I guess, can one of you answer that one? Or both of you, actually?
I can go first, maybe, because this is related to our methodology. So we have different criterion assessing product recalls and market bans. And of course, we award higher points to a company that, for example, had a product recall and disclosed it publicly, than to a company that had a product recall and didn't disclose anything, but maybe we found some information online. So this is something that we do not only for food safety, but across all of our risk factors, because we actually want companies to disclose information, even if it had some incident or negative event. So yeah, at least on the protein producer index, this is something that we take into account and consider and award more points to companies that disclose these events publicly.
All right, yeah. So it's the fact of disclosing recalls and not recalls itself that is actually of interest for you guys, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Because we consider that this information is important to investors, to stakeholders, and to the community. So we want to improve this culture of public disclosure among the companies.
Yeah, right. And I'd add to that how for us as investors, we're active investors. We're not sitting in a desk behind a desk. We're actually out on the ground. When possible, obviously the pandemic has caused issues, but we're out, we're in factories, we're in restaurants, we're in their operations. So, and we're talking to people, other people on the ground. So hiding a food safety issue is incredibly difficult in today's environment. So I think any company trying to hide an issue is going to be found out very, very quickly. I don't think it's something you can hide for very long. But as I said earlier, it's the response I care about. You know, I care about the way the company dealt with it and how they improve, change, develop new methods or whatever. And it's a learning process, whereas the ESG investors learning companies are often learning. Particularly, again, I'll highlight emerging markets where the companies tend to be smaller, they tend to be fast growing, tend to be having to learn a lot of this stuff as they're developing. It's not through any bad intention. Often these companies are involved. It may be just a case of lack of knowledge or understanding.
All right. So don't hide, disclose, and actually the fact of having a recall, because you are an active investor, and I think that's a key answer from you, Mystery. You are actually looking at what company did to manage these crises and to recover and to improve, and I think that's key. So thank you for that answer, and Mystery and Marianne. Thank you very much, Alec, for this great question. Should we go to the last part of the webinar on innovation? And I think that's a great question that you both are having, that you wanted me to ask you. And well, I'm going to ask it to both of you, and I let you see how you respond. But how do you manage to introduce innovation and traceability technologies in your expertise, actually, for both of you? Can you tell us more about it? Maria, if you want to start. And before you answer, Wai-Chan, I know you have to drop off in a few minutes. So if you want to drop off while we are talking, I want to thank you very much for being there. If not, if we finish on time, stay there, and Maria, go ahead.
Sure. So for innovation, we look at whether companies are implementing technology that provides traceability all the way to the end customer, such as, for example, blockchain technology that creates visibility and accountability in the supply chain. One of the main issues in most foodborne illnesses is inefficient tracking. For example, in the US, companies reported recovering an average of just 16% of recalled meat and poultry in completed recalls between 2013 and 2019. And well, technologies such as blockchain, apart from making it easier and faster to identify where food contamination might have occurred, is being championed as a solution to significantly reduce the likelihood of food fraud. As Suresh was mentioning before, food fraud is a key concern in the food sector, which is estimated to cost the global food industry around 49 billion each year. So in the index universe, there are only 14 companies out of 60 that we assess that have implemented or are in the process of developing consumer-facing technologies. And 10 of these companies are based in Asia, which is something very interesting because it indicates a growing concern from consumers for food safety and product traceability in this region. However, in overall, we see that the discussion around using this type of technology is moving very slow in the animal protein sector, despite there is a huge potential for these companies to leverage data effectively and reduce the threat of human error, while taking a proactive and preventive approach to food safety. So, can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So here in this slide, I have some examples of index companies that are using consumer-facing technology. So the first one, for example, is Bell Food Group, which is a Swiss meat processor, and it uses DNA traceback analysis. This technology allows tracing the cattle back through production to the farm, parent or individual cattle from which they originated. And with this tool, the company and consumers can verify that livestock labeled as coming from Switzerland was really raised and slaughtered in Switzerland. Another company with this type of technology is Shunshin Agriculture, a Chinese pork producer, which uses radio frequency identification technology and barcodes. And finally, Vinamilk, which is a Vietnamese dairy producer, which has implemented QR codes that allow consumers to trace the product back to its origin. So each product has a unique QR code and uses blockchain to ensure that the information cannot be counterfeited. So yeah, this is an overall view of the index companies with such technology.
Thank you, Maria. Suresh, do you want to answer that question? How critical this is for you?
I think it's all part of the initial answer I gave about the whole system, and what it reflects is back to the quality of the organization. It's good to see Vinamilk on there because that's a company we have invested in the past at Alquity. But I think what we do is we rate companies. We rate them in terms of their journey or their degree of quality, and innovation is one factor. And what that enables us to do is adjust the valuation of the company to reflect what that innovation will bring or that traceability will bring. Traceability can help with, reducing costs or increasing potential margin. Innovation can introduce, new consumers, so increasing potential opportunities in the future. So what we have built in for our investors is the ability to adjust the forward-looking valuation based upon innovation or traceability or other aspects of a business. Critical for us because that may mean a company that today may not be, from the outside world, from our peers, may not be seen as a great opportunity. But because we understand where they are today and their trajectory of that change, we can invest earlier. And if you can invest earlier, the chances of outsized returns are greater. As you know, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market often that can make the difference. And for us, what we're constantly looking at is that, but also in this space, whether it's alternative proteins or whatever, it's very much a private equity area. It's the companies tend to be less listed equities. They're not actually on, many of them are not even on many of our exchanges. So we're constantly talking to people in this space for IPOs, new companies entering, and often innovation comes from the new kid on the block, and it's identifying who's the next opportunity and if they can scale quickly and achieve that kind of growth we're looking for.
All right. Well, thank you. Very, very, very interesting. I want to see if there are any other questions. If not, I want to thank all of you. I think that was extremely interesting. That was a challenge to bring the finance topic into a World Food Safety Day. I made a big poker move on that one, I have to say. I was supported by Erika and Lee from the CGF and Wai-Chan. And I'm glad we made it, because I think that World Food Safety Day is to make linkages between the food safety and the non-food safety world. And I want to make sure that some of our members and stakeholders today are maybe a bit more equipped to go and talk to their finance people tomorrow, thanks to this webinar. To help you do that, and thanks to CMIN and the COM team and the CGF events team, we'll have a summary going out tomorrow of this webinar, so that there are some key takeaways that you can take with you. But I think we can say that food safety is at the crossroad of the food system challenges and of key trends of the future. So that's super exciting, and that's one reason to talk to everyone that seems to not be concerned by food safety, but actually is concerned and doesn't know it. Thank you very much, Suresh and Maria, to bring your perspective and to be with us today. Thank you very much, Wai-Chan, to bring your broader perspective from the CGF and your great leadership on all those topics to lead us in a more sustainable manner with the CGF. Thank you, everyone that has been listening to us. We want to wish a very happy World Food Safety Day, and stay tuned. We'll have many things to tell you in the near future. And thank you very much again to the CGF event team and COM team and the GFSI team to help us do that all together. Happy World Food Safety Day, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.